I think of Richard Goldberg as a Renaissance man, by which I mean to say he has multiple talents, and he's knowledgeable in an extraordinary number of areas. He's also well experienced. He served as a Navy Reserve Intelligence officer, including in Afghanistan, as a key advisor in both the House and the Senate, as Chief of Staff to Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner, and on the National Security Council as Director for Countering Iranian Weapons of Mass Destruction. In 2020, the regime in Tehran sanctioned Rich, a badge of honor, one that quite a few people here at FDD wear proudly. Most recently, Rich spent several months helping conceive, establish, and operationalize something new and something very important for the United States, the White House National Energy Dominance Council, the NEDC. Remember that, you're going to hear about it. He's now back at FDD as a senior advisor, where he's taking on a new and related project. I'm eager to talk to him about all this and more. I'm Cliff May, and I'm glad you're with us too, here on Foreign Policy. Rich, always a pleasure to see you.
Great to be back with you, Cliff.
All right, let's start with the basics. National security, it's about B-2 bombers and drones and air defense systems and submarines. Energy is about turning on the lights when you get home and filling your car with gasoline or plugging it in if you've got an EV. What's energy got to do with national security?
Well, energy is core to national security. It touches every single part of our national security for a few different reasons. Number one, it's core to our economy. Our economic security is national security. And if you don't have access to low-cost, abundant, reliable energy sources, then your economy will suffer. And if you don't make it yourself, if you're not independent in those sources, now you're relying on other countries, other areas, potentially conflict-prone areas, maybe authoritarians, enemies, etc. And if you can't make enough by yourself, not just to power your own economy, but to also hook onto allies and partners and to unhook them from adversaries, use it as a tool during conflict or to mitigate during conflict or to induce peace, then you're missing a major tool out of your economic statecraft toolbox. We add in one new flavor, and that is artificial intelligence, AI.
All right, we're going to come back to that in one
But this is one additional element here.
I know.
In our national security thinking where energy plays a big role. So all of this together, Cliff, you say, wow, energy is completely core to our national security. It's core to our economic security. Having a robust, abundant, reliable, low-cost energy source for the American people is really important, but having enough to supply allies and partners as well and to be able to use it as a tool of diplomacy and of warfare is really paramount. And once you build that capability and wield it correctly, you've just changed so much about how you can conduct foreign policy.
And it's a bit of a digression, but I do want to mention it. When people talk about wealthy countries or people talk about being wealthy, they think, oh, that means you got a lot of money in your pocket. You got a fat wallet. You got a bank account. It's really about energy. It's really about access to energy. I mean, I say this particularly because I lived in Africa for a number of years, and people were poor there. A lot of people were poor there. Not everybody, a lot of it. And what did poor mean? Poor meant you didn't have access to energy. You didn't have electricity. You didn't have, you had to use dung or wood as a fuel source to cook or to heat. If you had electricity, if you had gasoline for your tractor so you could plow your field rather than use a beast of burden, if you could take the excess crop that you had thanks to your tractor and get it to market before it rotted, you couldn't do that on horseback. You needed to do that in a car, and it wasn't going to be a Tesla plug-in. So the whole idea of wealth really has to do with energy in a way I don't think most people understand on a
100%.
Okay.
That's true in an agrarian-based society. Yeah. If you're talking about agriculture and farming, that is true in an industrial setting. More so true, obviously. It's true just for basic living standards and heating your home and being able to power, a car and get to work and have economic opportunity. Energy is paramount in your life, and so countries that have access to it do better. Countries that don't do worse. Scarcity drives conflict. That's not a new concept here in this world. It goes back centuries. but it also unlocks opportunity as new innovations, new discoveries are made, and we've seen that in multiple areas of the world.
Energy security, energy independence, energy dominance. Are these three different concepts, or are they the same?
They're interrelated, in my view, and I don't know that they're. I mean, I guess I could teach a course and design the textbook now, and people can disagree with it and have a different textbook. But in my view, energy security is the big picture of making sure the United States, partners, and allies have secure sources of energy. If you add in reliable, low cost, non dependent on foreign sources, you're moving into energy independence. And if you're talking about supplying not just yourself, but allies and partners, being able to actually drive markets, not depend on markets, not be an insulated market, being able to think about how to use it to induce peace and also to mitigate conflict or to create pressure on adversaries. Now you're in the realm of what I would think of as energy dominance.
And okay, I don't mean to be partisan here, but I think it's important to think about how various administrations have understood this. The last administration, the Biden administration, energy policy was not, as I understand it, a component of national security policy. It was a component of climate policy, wasn't it?
Right. I think the way to think about it is sort of instead of having a national energy dominance council, they established a czar to dismantle American energy dominance potentials. I mean, that's probably a partisan statement for me, but
John Kerry's
that was John Kerry's job. I mean, it was, if you look at the litigation from energy-rich states that were suing the federal government over the last 4 years before the Trump administration, you really take a look at who they're suing, how many departments, how many regulations, how many executive orders they're suing over. Just look at Alaska alone, and you see a whole of government attempt to strangle the production and export of American energy sources. We're talking about oil and gas, talking about just closing the book, shutting down coal. For a long period of time, a war on nuclear, though, that's finally coming back into vogue for the environmental folks who have realized that.
Are they getting it finally?
Well, in Europe, yes, because they've realized. You can look at the Germans. They abandoned nuclear energy. They killed off all fossil fuels, and they realized that they have no more availability of energy, and their prices are skyrocketing. So now, Great Britain, you're talking about, there's a climate extremist who's the Minister of Energy and Climate in Great Britain right now, in the Starmer government.
There you go again, yeah.
European folks. Suddenly, nuclear's back. Nuclear's okay. It's once again acceptable as a renewable, clean energy source because it has a vast amount of power to obviously create in a world where power is king at the moment in the context of AI, but also low-cost energy. And obviously in Europe, no longer being able to suck up to the Russians and suck up their oil and gas and facing increased pressure from the United States to get off faster from Russian oil and gas. They're looking for other solutions. So nuclear is okay again, which is nice, I guess. But the point is that in all of these buckets, this was the United States at its best ability to move not just from energy security and into energy independence, which is what had happened over the last decade. This was already moving us back away from energy independence, let alone closing off the potential for energy dominance. What do I mean by that? Well, if your whole idea is that what do we have here in America? We've got oil, we've got gas, we got a lot of gas, we have coal.
It helps that we frack, which the Europeans not doing, by the way. Yeah.
We can build nuclear. If you say no, all of this is off the table, we're not going to do this. What exactly are we going to do here? We're going to, for now, import as much as we can of wind and solar from foreign countries, whether it's the Chinese, Scandinavian, Europeans,
and the equipment that you need.
Equipment that's going in out of China and the supply chain that the Chinese will be able to hack into at some point, backdoor and infiltrate our grid. And then we'll put a lot of money in from the government to subsidize all of this, and we'll say we're going to try building the supply chain here too. It's great for manufacturing jobs. We're going to just build wind and solar here, and then you're going to wake up one day as your grid becomes more and more and more dependent on these intermittent, unreliable sources, and you're going to have a meltdown the way we saw in Spain earlier this year. And you're going to wonder, why is it that we no longer have cheap available energy? Why are we having rolling blackouts? And it's because we have declared war as a country for 4 years on reliable, low-cost baseload energy. And that is what was the driving factor in saying, okay, energy dominance is really where you want to get to from an economic and national security perspective. Energy independence is where we wanted to go for so many years, thinking about our dependence on the Middle East on oil for so long and getting out from under that. Energy security is sort of a basic need for the country. All of this is in jeopardy right now, and there's so much to do because you layer on not just having to roll back all these regulations and orders and shutdowns that have gone on in oil and gas and coal and nuclear, but then try to go warp speed to meet the power demands of the AI age to win the AI arms race. I mean, you're now talking about the need for a whole of government strategy out of the White House to bring every agency of government to the table to clear any hurdle possible, expedite every permit possible, provide financing, funding in any way that you can to turn every light switch back on and to race forward. And that is how the National Energy Dominance Council was born, and that is its mission and mandate and what it works on every day.
And this bothers me a lot. In so much of the media, they're praising China, run by the Communist Party of China, saying, look how far ahead they are. They're making all these solar panels, doing wind, and they ignore half the time, totally ignore the fact that China has been building coal-powered plants hand over glove. Now, I'm not even criticizing them for that. I'm saying the Chinese, obviously, it seems to me, tell me if I'm wrong, they get the importance of energy dominance and want to dominate it in every way. They love the fact, and I'm sure they're encouraging it, that Americans should think that, we want green energy. Green energy means renewables. Renewable means solar energy, means wind energy, as if those could supply the amounts of energy we need while they're not doing it themselves. And while they're doing environmental destruction, I've written about this, by mining cobalt in terrible ways from Africa and taking it and putting it into batteries that they refine. They're doing all of the above. And then John Kerry goes over there and has discussions with me, and they say, as they've been, probably around 2030, we'll start to reduce our emissions. And their emissions are, in terms of, if you're worried about carbon dioxide emissions, I'm not so worried. It's a separate discussion. I don't know if we have to have it today. But if you are, they are producing more emissions than the rest of the developed world combined. I mean, Trump talked about that at his UN speech, if I remember.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, if you wanted to design like the perfect trap for the United States and the Western world, to step back to say, okay, who's going to control the century? The country that has control over the periodic table, meaning critical minerals, especially rare earth critical minerals, but a whole other set as well. As far as upstream, like the actual mining production, midstream, the processing, refining of these materials, and downstream and the manufacturing of some of the key elements you do with these materials, whether it's magnet facilities, metal making, etc. If China owns that entire value chain and controls it, which they have built up doing for years, where we stop mining in America, we stop building things, we stop processing in America, we just like we did for everything else, contracted it out, let it just go offshore, let it go to China. We'll just import things, and even when we started the nascent steps of trying to get some rare earth out of the ground, still having to rely on China for the processing, that midstream piece, not being able to go fast enough to actually have the downstream manufacturing piece. I mean, that means that China, and we saw this earlier in the year, can just say, hey, we're stopping the flow of the following minerals on the periodic table, and we're done. We're done, because those minerals, they are going into our defense contractor platforms. They're going into advanced manufacturing. They're going to our cars. They're going into everything we make in this country that we find a value that keeps our society moving and going forward and keeps our nation defended. And we rely on China for it. That's crazy. This has ignited a major initiative which started under the National Energy Dominance Council as part of its mandate, has moved into the National Security Council to retake control of the periodic table for the United States. And we can talk about that. The second piece here is if power drives access to computing, and computing unlocks knowledge, and knowledge is going to be who controls society, who controls the next transformation through artificial intelligence, right?
Okay.
I know people call these data centers. I think Secretary Bergen is right. You should call them knowledge centers, not data centers. Because now, for the first time in history, a kilowatt can produce knowledge. And so power creates knowledge, creates AI advancement. So when you want to unlock the next algorithm and the next algorithm, each of those computing levels require more and more power at these knowledge centers to unlock. And at some point, you're going to get to that, sort of flywheel effect, supposedly, where the software writes the software. Now, it's possible at that point AI makes it self-efficient on a power side. You can't depend on that. So right now, when you look at the demand curve, needing to basically build in America another 100 Denvers of power generation availability.
That's what we're going to need.
I mean, that's what we're going to, on top of the existing grid.
Yeah.
Our grid is failing already. In certain places is under heavy stress. We had a couple of close calls over this summer in a couple of regions in the Northeast and also in the Midwest, where because of the attack on oil and gas, because of shutdowns of coal power plants over several years, we don't have the energy we need to keep the grid stable in peak energy hours. We're just relying on solar and wind in many of these areas of the country. And so, but for some orders earlier this year of stopping the closure of additional coal power plants, that we may have seen some blackouts in a couple parts of the country. Haven't seen that yet, thank God. That's the existing grid today. That's not even with the additional power need of these knowledge centers. And so if you were the Chinese designing the perfect trap, right? This gets back to my point. Why not wage this incredible information operations campaign to convince everybody in America that you need to just abandon all baseload, reliable energy of low cost, embrace these intermittent sources that are Chinese sourced, that they're, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, in article after article about how the Chinese are racing forward in wind and solar.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we have to compete with them. We're losing now in the green energy transition because we're not making it. We're not buying it. We're not building it. We're deprioritizing. What a terrible mistake. Okay. Meanwhile, to your point, so they're going to make all this stuff, and we're supposed to buy all this stuff. We're supposed to chase this rabbit down this hole of wind and solar, abandoning our own abundant oil and gas and coal, abandoning going into advanced nuclear. Instead, invest in intermittent, unreliable sources that lead you to become Spain and have blackouts, and your grid is totally unstable and not resilient and gets taken down pretty easily, potentially with back-end ways in for the Chinese themselves through their cyber capabilities and their own technology that might be built into some of these technologies that are now plugged into your grid. And by the way, they're not going to hold themselves to any of the same standards in what they actually do to create their own power leap forward to unlock their knowledge leap forward in AI. They're going to build a coal power plant a week. They're going to dam whatever river they can find.
And that's not how
they're going to mine whatever they can mine. They have no trial lawyers. They have no environmental regulations. They can do whatever they want, and they're playing with the House's money, right? There's no private financing going on. It's all Communist Party. And if they see Americans try to do something to undercut them in the market, they'll dump the market, and if they'll undercut the price. They'll make sure it's economically unviable to compete with them in any way, and they'll leap forward in power in a completely environmentally irresponsible way, and through negotiations with the environmental community, because they're still a developing nation, of course.
Which they're not.
As the largest economy on Earth from PPP scale, second to the United States, none. This is a developing nation, of course, so they have to have exceptions to all the rules and any conventions. So we're going to destroy our entire energy sources. We're going to shut down American energy. We're going to destroy our ability to keep pace with AI power demand. We're going to kill our ability to manufacture things in this country. They're going to be able to do all of that totally playing by the rules that they've helped negotiate unfairly, and we're going to be saying, oh well, at least we're competing in the green transition. I mean, it's ludicrous. That's exactly how you lose the century.
Right.
And we have decided to say, okay, this is ludicrous. We're not going to lose the century. And here's what's interesting. All of that sounds pretty partisan. It sounds like you're in the middle of a climate fight and climate change debate and all that, and you can have those debates. But I'll tell you what has happened in the last year. There is a reason why these quote-unquote tech bros have all gotten on the Trump bandwagon. There is a reason why all the top tech companies keep coming to the White House and keep coming to the administration. You can have conversations with the president. If you are Meta, if you are AWS, if you are Google, if you are, keep naming some of these companies, you know what your top 3 priorities are for this year and next year and the next year?
Sufficient energy.
Power. Exactly. Those are your top 3 priorities. And power is not partisan. Kilowatts, electrons, they're not voting Republican or Democrat. They're voting whether or not you're going to win the AI arms race.
Yeah.
And that is paramount.
And you know who, interestingly, I don't quote that often, but who understands this? I'll give you the quote and then tell you who said it. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere, artificial intelligence, will become the ruler of the world. You know who said that?
It wasn't Mao. I don't think they had AI.
Close. Vladimir Putin.
Oh, there you go.
He understands it. I mean, he's not stupid.
Putin. Anybody who is and this is what's so interesting. There is this great disconnect. The entire conversation on AI from a public discourse perspective, maybe even national security perspective, what are the applications? What are the moral implications of those applications? What is it going to mean in school and education? And how are kids being taught? They can't be taught by AI. They can't take tests by AI. What is this going to do to us as a society? Really interesting. What's it going to do with healthcare and surgery and advancements in medicine and testing and laboratory settings? Really cool stuff. Awesome. Amazing. What's it going to do in defense? Are we going to weaponize AI? What is it going to mean? Are we going to have robot drone wars? AI fought. What's been happening what have the Israelis learned from AI in the field in Gaza? Will that be applied? Will there be a UN convention to stop the weaponization of AI? Very interesting national security conversation. You know what? It doesn't matter. It's an entirely moot conversation in every single bucket if you don't have the power to unlock any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real disconnect in public understanding of the energy side of AI. That is not misunderstood in the industry. It's not misunderstood from tech companies, the hyperscalers, data center operators, utilities. It's not misunderstood by some key foreign governments. You take Putin, for example, on the adversary side. On the partner side, the UAE comes to mind. What XRG in the UAE has done, Dr. Sultan there, of really being forward-thinking and assembling people early on from the entire tech community, being part of this huge investment in AI energy infrastructure, not just the AI side of AI infrastructure, but the energy side as well. And there's others as well. The Saudis are looking at this, other Gulf partners. The Israelis, obviously close ally of ours, leading innovator. We've had U.S.-Israel energy cooperation in the past. We looked at this over the summer and said, it's time for us to take the next step with Israel in AI and energy, help develop AI solutions for energy and energy solutions for AI together, bringing the national labs of the United States, all the innovation of Israel. You could combine that potentially with Gulf money and leadership as well under the Abraham Accords, but we established a new joint working group, U.S.-Israel AI Energy, the first bilateral kind that exists. And this has already now been replicated and expanded in the MOU that was signed when the president was in the United Kingdom. Everybody wants to talk to us about AI and energy. It's AI and energy. And the energy piece here is really important to understand, and I think we can do a lot of focus on that with our existing AI work, our existing grid work here at FDD, and we will do that looking at this question.
So you to set up this National Energy Dominance Council, you work with the Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, and Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy. Makes sense to everybody that you'd work with Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy. By the way, I followed him for a number of years. Wow, what a brilliant guy. We haven't had a Secretary of Energy like him before. And again, I don't mean to be partisan, but really, he's I mean, he just knows this subject in a way that previous energy secretaries, have not. Doug Burgum, interesting interior, and my guess is you're going to tell me that one of the reasons is if you want these critical minerals and you don't want to depend on anybody else, you're going to develop them, for example, here in the U.S. They're not as rare as people think they are. It's just hard to mine. And getting a mine going in the U.S. up to now, it takes decades, right? So is this something that that this National Energy Dominance Council will address through the interior so we can also be independent in terms of the minerals we need for
100%. Oil and gas leases.
Well, that for sure.
Come through interior.
Which we have. And
on land and offshore.
Yeah, right.
Mining and minerals.
Right.
Really critical. Obviously, interior playing an outsized role there. Federal land issues in general. As you're thinking about the build side of energy and energy for AI, where is this going to happen? Where can it happen fastest? So interior will play another really outsized role there. So it makes perfect sense for interior to be at the heart.
Yeah.
It is the heart of our energy for the United States. The Department of Energy has huge equities in nuclear energy. It obviously plays across various energy builds and has a lot of financing tools and funding tools at its disposal. Does a lot in the international energy coordination space as well. But the crown jewel of the U.S. balance sheet of energy comes out of the Department of the Interior. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so having Interior chair, energy at vice chair, but then making sure in this council is sort of a mini cabinet, right? In the same way the National Security Council takes several different departments and puts them together for anybody who touches national security. Some are standing members who always have some sort of a nexus to national security. Others get brought in on an ad hoc basis whenever they might have an equity in an NSC discussion. The NEDC is very much in that same mindset, which is, you might have DOD at the table because they are responsible for offtake agreements for various energy sources, or they might be doing some of the construction out of the Army Corps of Engineers. They might control land that can be made available for rapidly deploying or developing new energy sources like in advanced nuclear. So DOD plays a major role. The State Department itself already plays most simplistic roles of just, approving licenses to allow for cross-border energy pipelines to take place, but also obviously are working throughout our partner and allied nations at our embassies, looking at what their energy needs are, making those recommendations back to the Department of Commerce, the U.S. Trade Representative. We're in the middle of massive global trade negotiations. Now they need to be at the table to talk about trade from an energy perspective, because energy dominance, as I said, is the export of an abundance of produced American energy. And so we look at Europe needing to get off of Russian oil and gas. We want them to buy here. The Indians want more beautiful, clean coal. We can sell it to them. The Indo-Pacific partners are very...
Can we right now, are we at a place where we can, where Trump does want the Europeans not to buy Russian oil and gas because that's supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. Can we right now say, we'll sell you what you need. You can get off right now. Can we do that at this point?
We can dramatically reduce their imports of oil and gas and replace most of what they need, offset by what else is out in the market.
India too?
India too, on the oil side?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, if you look at a total market picture here, if you're saying, okay, I want Chinese imports of Russian oil to stop, I want Indian imports of oil to stop, and anybody else who's importing oil, you're going to add up those numbers. You're basically looking at total Russian exports. You're going to look at what spare capacity looks like in the market. You're going to say, okay, well, are we still trying to squeeze the Iranians but down from their 1 million+ barrels per day? What's going to happen in Venezuela? You're going to want to do this in a much bigger picture instead of. But in general, can you start? Can you force the Indians off? Yes. Can you get the Europeans off? Yes. Could there be a change that happens in Venezuela that unlocks increased production in the future? I hope so. I think it's possible. I don't think the president's really happy with Maduro these days. And so, what will happen to the Chinese is that, that you basically could isolate them as the one remaining importer, could threaten them, have them buy more American. What will that do to price depending on where you are? Will the Saudis or other partners go along with swing production along with the U.S.? These are interesting questions. Yeah. Could you have a $5 bump in the price of oil? It's possible. But don't forget that every $5 you add on, you're incentivizing more production in the United States as well. So there, this whole thing, it's not such an easy answer to do. But in the end, I believe that markets are elastic and markets do take care of themselves when we intervene with sanctions. We saw that in the Iran context. And I do believe you could do things. By the way, this is a little bit of a going down the rabbit hole. John Hardy at FDD, who helps run our Russia program, and myself, we did a piece in the New York Post a couple weeks ago where we said, you don't need to just end all barrels coming out of Russia. You could use an old approach we used on Iran many years ago, which is to use our sanctions to force China and India to keep all the money owed to Russia for those deliveries in an escrow account. Deny Putin the revenue without attacking the barrels head on immediately. Let the transition and absorb the drawdown on Russian exports while still denying the revenue to Putin. I think you can actually do this in a much more calibrated way. That being said, when you look at the numbers here out of a country like France, there's a narrative that the Europeans just got off of Russian gas slowly. It's not a correct narrative. You're hearing that from the president. Somebody just briefed him on this clearly and said, "Hey, Mr. President, here's the numbers. I don't know if you know this, but our French, our European allies, they're not buying American gas instead of Russian gas. They're helping fund this war." And he's like, "Well, do we have capacity? Do we have suppliers?" And the people of the National Energy Dominance Council, I imagine, have said, yes, we've talked to a bunch of American LNG exporters, and they're ready to go. Will we need to invest a little bit more in regasification inside some of these European countries? Yes, I think infrastructure is still needed to receive our LNG, convert it to natural gas in some places. Do we have that capacity in the market to accelerate that? Yes. Are there some companies that actually just make regasification, for lack of a better term, ships that sit at your port and do the job for you instead of having to build a permanent facility? Yes, there's one American company that we could get behind and try to expand and accelerate their work. So we have a lot of things we can offer right now in the toolkit to the Europeans. And so, yes, if you're asking me just on Europe, could we tell the Europeans, hey, tomorrow you're winding it down? Whatever that means. Is it a year wind down? It's a 6-month wind down, and you're winding up on American imports? Yes, I would like to see us make that policy. And if we need to readjust or give them extensions based on market reaction, we can do that. But I'm very bullish on American gas. Secretary Wright and Secretary Bergen were just in Italy a couple weeks ago for a big gas conference called Gas Tech. And Secretary Wright was quoted by saying that he thinks that America will double its LNG exports in the next 5 years.
Wow.
That's tremendous. And by the way, again, not to get partisan, the last administration banned effectively the export of American LNG, halted all permits on LNG export facilities.
Why? Was that climate?
I mean, just
I don't understand why.
Yes.
Climate?
Yes. We just kind of kill gas.
Because, by the way, if you're worried about climate, natural gas is much less in terms, is like half, say, coal, and doesn't have the and there are pollutants that are.
But they don't want it. They don't want us to get it out of the ground.
They don't want to get it out of the ground.
I mean, it's ludicrous. Some people say like, oh, the phrase, you shot yourself in the foot. Yeah. I think it's literally like shooting yourself in the head twice. I mean, that's what the policy was of shutting down American energy. It's totally ludicrous. And you look at geopolitical things that Democrats support. They want to support Ukraine. They want to defeat Russia in this war. They want Europe to get off of, subsidizing Putin. Why are you attacking the energy source to help them do that? That makes no sense.
And from a point of view of even European prosperity, electricity has gone up.
Yes.
Usually more expensive. I don't know if they can get their nuclear back up and running again or not.
Well, we're excited to sell them as much as possible to help them. I'll tell you.
Well, talk a little bit about small modular nuclear, because that seems to be promising, right?
That's
Because
right.
you put it in place, you don't need a lot of grid to get the electricity.
Exactly. You manufacture it quickly. You build.
Right.
The build is it's all modular.
Yeah.
You'll be able to have multiple areas, take up less space.
Right.
The power generation as you start moving them around can start helping you power some of these knowledge centers.
Not terribly vulnerable to terrorists,
I mean, you have to secure
like anything. Yeah.
like anything else. I mean,
Yeah.
I think this is one important thing to understand is if what I've said is true, that power is king for the century,
Right.
that then it would stand to reason that our adversaries would need to find a way to defeat
Right.
that power generation, to defeat us on the grid, collapse grid at some point. And so cyber attacks become
Right.
really relevant.
Right.
And making sure we have a resilient grid and a secure grid,
Right.
that we have contingencies in place, we have redundancies in place, making sure that we have physical security at certain areas that will be really important. EMP threats, which is
Electromagnetic pulse. Right.
people would think of like, oh, maybe lower potential, but pretty high risk.
Yeah.
If somebody were to pull that off, like the Chinese, the Russians. So
An EMP, so people know, it's like you have an atomic blast, but way up high, and it's just I think it's the gamma rays that come down and fry the
everything
grid.
will be off. I mean, the whole
right. There's
the grid will be off. Everything will be off.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's no. So we have to take these sort of threats seriously if we believe in the need for more power.
Right. Okay, so
And by the way, on the nuclear side, just
no.
we stopped really making all parts of the nuclear value chain in this country
Yeah,
for a long time.
the Nuclear Regulatory Commission essentially became a way not to build nuclear, right?
Well, I mean that's true of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as well, of just finding a way not to build anything, and true of mining in this country. I mean they've all sort of gone the same way of just, no, we're not going to do these things. We're going to take forever to try to approve something, and then we won't actually approve something. So there's a lot of undoing cultures in a lot of these institutions that needs to happen. But we don't do basic things like, well, we do now a little bit. We're going to expand it, but we haven't done like things like enrich uranium, make our own nuclear fuel in this country. We went into a position where we depended on Russia for a large percent of our imports of nuclear fuel. That's crazy. And a consortium in Europe, which is nice, but my goodness, like, why aren't we enriching uranium? Why aren't we producing the next generation of high-assay, low-enriched uranium, HALEU, to power these advanced nuclear reactors? The Russians created the entire value chain under their atomic energy state-owned company. So they will build you the reactor. They'll fuel the reactor. They'll do the take back. They'll do all these little pieces. They'll do recycling. We don't do recycling of nuclear waste in this country. We stopped trying a long time ago. So it just sits around. We could do things with the nuclear waste, and you can also expand your footprint in nuclear energy because you're not afraid of what to do with the nuclear waste. You have a solution for it. In the past, it was just like, oh, let's just find a mountain in Nevada and stick it under there, Yucca Mountain. Otherwise, and people said no, and Harry Reid was senator and defended it, wouldn't let it happen. So nuclear waste just sits at places around the country now and decommissioned reactors. It's crazy.
But it can be useful.
It could be useful. You can do things with it. You can create new nuclear fuel out of it. So this is now happening. There are startups. In the same way that in the defense tech space, you have like your Andurils of the world that are being backed by VC plays and then getting government support, improving flexibility and innovation and trying to make our defense industry more dynamic. This is happening in the nuclear energy space as well, across the supply chain, across the value chain.
All right, so you're going to do one of the things you're going to do, because you always have a lot of balls in the air. You're going to do a project here that will be supportive, consistent with what a think tank does to help the government bolster national security, since we're a think tank on national security. So talk a little bit about what we can do here that will be helpful to this project.
Listen, the program on energy and national security has a pretty basic thesis, and that is We are going to find ways to support the energy dominance agenda. Make sure we're looking at opportunities. We're understanding what the gaps are. Make suggestions. We have incredible existing workflows at FDD that tie right into everything we've talked about, and we can tap into that expertise and really focus it on some of these energy, either geopolitical issues that are going on, domestic issues, the AI infrastructure build out, grid security issues across our programs. We have the center, incredible center on cyber.
Yeah.
And they've been doing work on securing the grid for a long time.
Absolutely.
And so we have an incredible value add, and we're ahead of the game already, and we need to be talking about it in terms of the AI arms race. We have a China program, and just an incredible team assembled there with Craig Singleton, Admiral Montgomery, Matt Pottinger chairing it as well. And they're talking to the Taiwanese a lot. They're looking at their energy needs. They're looking at what happens in a crisis with China. The need to build the Alaska LNG pipeline as quickly as possible to supply our Indo-Pacific partners, to make sure we're stockpiling American gas in these foreign partners in the Indo-Pacific, starting with Taiwan, to make sure they can withstand any potential energy embargo that the Chinese might impose at some point. And so that's a great play. You talk about wherever you want to go in the world, Israel, the Middle East, Iran, normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Energy is core to all of this. With Iran on really having been cut down a size after the 12-day war, there's a huge opportunity right now for the U.S. government to use pressure on Baghdad to finally remove Iran from Iraq's energy sector. And I think you're starting to see that happen. In northern Iraq, in the Kurdish areas, an agreement finally, after almost 3 years, to restart the Iraq-Turkey pipeline and get oil back out of the ground and flowing in northern Iraq, potentially looking at the rest of Iraq that's underdeveloped, with U.S. oil companies being at the lead here, helping Iraq turn itself energy independent instead of dependent on first electricity and also gas from Iran. That is now going to isolate the Iranians further inside their own borders, right? Lebanon has...
By the way, that would mean, it seems to me, that the war we fought in Iraq to free Iraq ends up successful. It was not successful because when we pulled out entirely in 2011, I think it was, that opened the door for Iran to come in and say, thanks for getting rid of Saddam for us, we'll take over from here. We didn't want to fight that war for the sake of the Ayatollah in Tehran. Now, if we can change that around, I do think Iraq has got more potential than most countries in the Middle East to be decent.
Yeah, if you disarm those militias of Iran, like, they're done. We really come down hard on Baghdad for that. And you say, Iran is out of your energy sector and financial sector, and we're going to help you everything you need very rapidly to make sure you're not dependent on Iran. Think about what has happened to the Ayatollah's ring of fire strategy in the Middle East. Hezbollah collapsing, Lebanon out of their grasp, Assad then collapsing. They have fallen back to Iraq. Iraq's the Alamo, in my view, for Iran. They lose Iraq because we kicked them out of the energy sector, we kicked them out of the financial sector, we disarmed the militias. They fall back within their borders with no strategic threat at this point, at least, post 12-day war, with their nuclear capabilities diminished so extensively. That's not a good look for the supreme leader. That to me is a recipe for instability. Now with the sanctions from the UN also coming back, the snapback. But look at the bigger picture. IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, as we call it, the IMEC, and the idea that energy will not just flow through the Middle East. The Middle East will be central to the flow of global commerce and energy infrastructure. That means Turkey's attempts to interfere in the Eastern Mediterranean now have a geopolitical aligned multipolar pushback from the United States, from India, to say, hey, we're going to develop Cyprus, we're going to develop Greece, and we're going to connect Greece to Cyprus to Israel in various ways to make sure this corridor succeeds of delivering energy and goods all the way up from either India or the Middle East to Europe. Where else can this make sense? We could see energy infrastructure connections between the Saudis and the Israelis. There is an east-west oil pipeline that already exists in Saudi Arabia. There was an idea back in Abraham Accords times in 2020 during the first Trump administration. Some very smart people involved in that administration on the Treasury Department and Jared Kushner thinking of connecting that pipeline, which just dumps into the Red Sea, going up the coast across either Jordan at the south and connecting to an existing pipeline that would need to get expanded, which is the Eilat Ashkelon pipeline, or going up a little farther north and coming across to Haifa with new pipeline build. You could take Saudi oil and export it much quicker, avoiding 3 choke points: Strait of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and the Suez Canal.
And just people know, Strait of Hormuz is where the Iranian oil comes through, and this regime has always said, we'll close down the Straits of Hormuz. You won't get any oil. China or others, and Bab el-Mandeb, of course, that's where the Houthis have been hitting the ships. So that's the oil from the Red Sea.
So, people who are still concerned about, yes, Iran still has missiles. They could still mine the straits. The Houthis are still there. They still have missiles. They could mine the straits. They could do things. The Egyptians, what will happen there? So there's so many things in supply chains that we've talked about. We have incredible work that Elaine Dzensky at our Center on Economic Financial Power has been working on supply chains. It fits into the critical minerals piece. We have a lot of work cut out for us, but if we keep the mandate of we need to take control of the periodic table, we need to win the AI arms race by having the power to win the AI arms race, and we need to make America energy dominant for our national security interest so that Americans have access to low-cost, reliable energy at home with a secure, stable, resilient grid, but also we have abundant energy to offer to allies to unhook them from adversaries or to use in times of war as pressure points on our adversaries, or, as has been reported in the case of Azerbaijan and Armenia, to use as an inducement for cooperation, perhaps to incentivize parties to make peace where there is conflict, seeing that also in Africa in some of these conflict resolutions. That is American energy dominance. That's energy and national security coming together. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to work on.
In terms of the AI, artificial intelligence arms race you mentioned, besides China, is anybody else a real rival to us?
That's the primary. That's the primary
rival. Because I don't.
Now,
Putin would like to, but I don't think he has the bandwidth at this point.
Would Putin be able to take applications and algorithms that come out? Could he partner with Xi? To use DeepSeek for his own weapons industry and R&D.
Yeah.
I'll let some of our experts in our military center maybe opine on those issues. Evan Montgomery might have some ideas. But when we look at the data stacks, the tech stacks that are actually in competition right now, it's the United States and it's China.
Yeah. So and the bottom line becomes, it is absolutely essential, if you care about American greatness, if you care about America not having to kowtow to the strongest communist party in history and its allies in the axis of, if you care about any of that, we have to be dominant in energy. We have to be dominant in artificial intelligence. That has to be what a major priority for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
And we have to have control of the periodic table.
Which is part of that. I mean, for these, and have control of the periodic table means that either here in the U.S. or in countries that we're friendly with, we are getting the minerals we need for as long as we need these minerals. Again, there may be scientific advances where magnets can be made in all kinds of things. The technology continues to move. You never know. But for now, we have to see we have to understand what it is we need. And the thing is that people don't realize, and this is, of course, this comes out of China and Russia as well. We need a multipolar world. No, they don't want a multipolar world. They want a world in which they dominate. But they know it sounds nice to Westerners. So yes, a multipolar world. It'll be more diverse. America shouldn't be the hegemon. The fact of the matter is, we need to be dominant, because if we're not, then the strongest communist party in history will be dominant, as well as its closest allies in places like Tehran, Moscow, and Pyongyang. That's the reality out there.
Secretary Burgum says something that I think is very profound, and I think he's right. Coming into this year, 2 existential threats face the United States. Number 1, Iran acquires a nuclear weapon. And number 2, China wins the AI arms race.
Mm.
One of them, for now, has been severely delayed at worst, and maybe at best destroyed and prevented. And the other one we got to work on really, really, really fast and really hard, and that's what the National Energy Dominance Council is working on. That's what we're going to work on.
Wow. This is really important stuff. Lots of other things I could ask you, but I want anything else that you do, any of the points that you want to make that we haven't. I'm so glad you're working on this stuff. I'm so glad that you worked with Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum. It sounds like, I'm so impressed that they understand this, that this administration does. This is hugely consequential for our kids and for our grandkids. So thank you, Rich, for all you do.
Thanks for all you do. Thanks for FTD for all it does.
You bet.
Thanks for Foreign Policy for all it does.
And thanks to all of you who listened to this conversation here today on Foreign Policy.